Right, should we get going?
Yeah, let's
Got
go.
40 minutes, yeah?
Go for it. Okay.
This is Reese and Bob. We run Legit Kit, which is a kit house supplying indies up and down the country that make unscripted programs, and we specialise in self-shooter kit. So for 2025, we want to sort of put heads over the parapet and start creating some video content in order to build a bit of a community around kit and all things telly.
Informative, hopefully, chats with people all across the industry, whether it's a PD talking about a lighting setup that they use that worked particularly well on a production, or production staff talking about the challenges of the last show they worked on. But for the first one, we wanted to keep it quite general and bring a friend of ours, Kimberly Godbolt, on just to chat about all things telly, really. She runs Talented People with Rosie Turner, probably the most well-known, prestigious talent finding company in
And a lovely
telly.
person.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to see you both.
One of the reasons we were keen to have this chat is because it's sort of, knowledge is power and all of that. And I think as freelancers, because three of us have come from a freelance background. We were all shooting PDs back in the day before where we are now. So we know what it was like when we were, in the field, and not knowing what's going on, not knowing what's being commissioned, who's busy, who's hiring, all this kind of stuff. And I think that is still across the board the general feeling. No one really knows unless you've got an in with a couple of companies. No one really knows. But now, from our perspective,
Definitely.
and your perspective, the more we can sort of share from what we're learning, I think more people can get a better understanding as to what it's like out there. We just kick straight off and dive right in. Like, what was last year like compared to what the year ahead is looking like from your perspective, do you think?
Yeah, so, did you say this podcast might be about 40 minutes, or could it be 2 days long? Because there's a lot to be said. Because last year was a very difficult year for most, if not all, people certainly in traditional telly production as we once knew it. Commissions are still very much down. Advertising has not bounced back. People are still very much out of work in terms of freelancers. Returning series didn't come back. Lots of stuff still on the shelves, proverbial shelves from the year before, where companies, broadcasters are trying to save money by not recommissioning, just eking out what they've got, kind of foraging at the back of the food cupboard and going, let's not do a big shop just yet. Let's just see let's eat the freezer. That's how I feel like last year was.
A great way to put it.
And I think going forward into this year, you'd hope, and I think there are some signs that, commissions are moving a bit more, but I feel like it just feels like it's a necessity in a way, rather than okay, great, we're going to get back to normal. I think everybody has kind of reluctantly accepted that things are just never going to go back to the way it once was pre-COVID, and then that massive boom, and then now the huge drop. But it's just changing. And again, it's really frustrating, I know, hearing people say this all the time. And it's like, well, where do I fit into all of this? Fine, it's changing. We keep hearing it's changing. What does that mean? I'm still not working, or I still don't know whether, my job as a PD or a PM or a series producer or an exec is sustainable. Is it going to be valid in a few years' time? I think in summary, last year's still very, very hard. This year has kicked off, still very quiet, but with the glimmers of some new commissions that might be sort of rumbling, albeit not enough to sustain, a kind of a regular kind of growth or period at this time of year. But more change are coming, and kind of a relatively slow start to the first half of the year, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
Have you found has it been a kind of a busy start to January? And what kinds of productions are you sending your kits out to?
I mean, a positive sign for January, like first week back, we've had inquiries for what we've maybe called the sort of more high-end sort of streamer sort of standard show, like bigger unscripted shows. We've had inquiries for some kit for that, for a long-running series. We heard of a recommissioned greenlit for a BBC Two series, which again is a sort of long-running series, which I guess is the middle of the market. And then mainly most of our stuff is that sort of Channel 4, Channel 5, ITVX, Obdoc, unscripted stuff. And we've had loads of inquiries for that stuff in the first week, and we've had kits go out on another Channel 5 series that's been greenlit. And we're sensing that stuff's been greenlit like now. This isn't stuff that we were talking with these companies about in December, because we've got good open relationships with a lot of our clients, indies that we've worked for the last couple of years since we set the company up, that we know well enough now that they're telling us as early as possible. And we're getting a call saying, we've got something that needs going out on Friday.
Wow. So really quick decisions.
It's really quick. And we're hoping that there's a sign that with the new year that they are putting their hand in their pocket and greenlighting stuff. And we're finding some of the inquiries were series that we supplied in 2023 that didn't come back in 2024, even though they were long-running series that have now been greenlit for 2025, which is a good sign. And I guess it goes back to what you were talking about, programs in the freezer or programs on the shelf, that they're now coming back in and they're going to be shot this year, which is a great sign.
That is good. And you hope that that's the sort of start of a slightly more stable amount of commissioning, rather than oh shit, we've got nothing on the shelves, let's we do need stuff to go out, and then it sort of tails off again. I think that's the danger, isn't it? No one's, whether or not they've figured out a slightly more sustainable, stable cycle, or whether this is a knee-jerk, oh god, okay, now because we've got a bit of money in the bank again, or a bit of money in the budget to spend, let's go ahead and commission.
I think from all those involved, from us to the people that are making it and whatever, it plays into even the mental health side of things, because to know that there are things going on already right at the beginning of the year, it sort of really helps on the mental side of things, because you go, oh, okay, well, it's sort of, things might be picking up, there's hope, or maybe more and more things will be greenlit over the coming weeks and months. So rather than a really quiet doom and gloom January that turns into February that goes, when are we going to hear about these commissions starting up? So I mean, you take it as it is, I guess. It sort of feels like a positive start so far. So
I think what's difficult is that in any industry, the decisions that are made at the top ripple down, will affect everybody in the industry. And the freelancers, not saying at the bottom of the pile, but you're the sort of often the last people to get hired, the last people to get thought about, and you're not in the meetings when commissions are happening. So I guess the big question is really is there just going to be more content made this year in whatever form? And that's what's basically going to affect everyone, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. And that's what everybody wants to know, is the $1 million question. And I think, look, there is definitely an optimistic view that, yes, traditional telly is broken. It's not what it used to be. There is still a level of work. And people obviously still want to watch stuff on, some people want to watch stuff on linear. Most people want to watch stuff on streaming on demand. But that content is going nowhere. The world of content is full of opportunity, because all we're doing all day is walking about with a phone in our hands, looking at whether it's little funny videos, or whether it's a new series someone's recommended that I can access from my iPad or my phone, or I'm sitting on the sofa and choosing something and then getting annoyed when I binge watched a series and finished it. It's more that it's content making industry as a whole that's had a massive shake up and isn't fit for purpose in the way that it was 10, 20 years ago. But the content has gone nowhere, and we still need people to make that content. It's just trying to marry up the opportunity and the skill sets with the people, and there are way too many people in telly that the necessary to make content when there were already people making said social and branded content. It's just trying to work out where those two worlds collide.
We're always talking about the middle of TV is the one that's falling away, right? We've got sort of the bottom end stuff, a lot of make it cheap, stack it high, Channel 5 stuff, and then you've got your high end sort of streamer docs and stuff. Like, what vibes are you getting in terms of, is that the pattern that's going to continue into 25? Like, what sort of stuff is going to get commissioned? Because there's going to be commissions, right? We just hope it's going to be more than last year, but it's a given that there's going to be stuff commissions.
I think we will continue to see what people are consuming a lot of, which is high-end, glossy entertainment. But again, there won't be a lot of that commission because it's so expensive to make, and they're such big punts that they've probably already been commissioned and they're being made on the down low, or there might be some decisions now for one massive team, but that'll take them through to 26. But I think big glossy entertainment, yes. I think really high-end documentary, yes. Again, kind of the biopics or like big celebrations of music or true crime, although I do sense that I think we reached the height of true crime, and we might be on the other side of that, only because there's only so much like people can take, right? Even I feel guilty when I look at a documentary on a streamer that I think I really should watch that, and I bet it's really brilliant. but can I deal with death again right now? And then you feel really terrible for thinking that, because you're like, this is someone's story that they've laid out there for you, and someone's made that, and the team behind it have had to go all through it. But I think there's still some demand for that, albeit maybe not as high as before. And I think those are the main genres. I think the kind of the standard sort of 7-8 o'clock stuff that we used to see go out on linear is definitely, there will be an amount of it, but that's not coming back, and it's probably slowly sort of phasing out. And then, like you say, the kind of the daytime or cheap stuff that needs to go out to fill holes and to obviously to reach the audience that still enjoys that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about quiz shows or studio stuff, actually. I haven't had a lot of intel from that side of things.
The TV industry's been in transition before, like maybe 2007, 2008, when that sort of credit crunch happened.
Yeah.
The industry changed massively then, and I remember being a junior staff, waiting to sort of get my first job as a director, maybe 2, 3, 4 years in the future from there. And it all went from suddenly directing crews to self-shooting. I mean, I remember being on a shoot for 8 o'clock for ITV, and we would do A roll in the morning and B roll in the afternoon, and there would be me as a runner or a junior researcher, there'd be an AP, a producer, a director, a cameraman, a sound man, and that was just for a kind of a standard 8 o'clock for ITV. And then fast forward 5 years, the industry obviously went through a bit of a blip, but it came out, it was different, but it wasn't necessarily any better or any worse. It was just different, and one would hope that that's what we're going to see now. There's still going to be content being made, but it's just going to be slightly different.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think, and we've gone through, everyone has gone through various cycles of emotion about it, from the downright shock to genuine anger and fear, about being able to pay the bills, or, what am I going to do next? I can't believe the industry's done this to me in my career that I've honed over, 10, 20, 30 years. And now I think there is this sort of reluctant acceptance that, okay, although we still don't quite understand all of the whys, we sort of get that it is changed for good. And whilst there's always going to be TV content being made in some form, it's not going to be in the same amount. It's just going to be different. And that's how we need to approach it and spot opportunity and find out where we can fit in, because we are a really, really talented bunch of people who can tell stories like no other. And certainly, in my opinion, better than a lot of people who've come up through certainly corporate ranks. And then, I really think a TV person with the background that they have and the right attitude can make a huge difference to the output, the content, whether that's internal comms or external comms or part of a marketing kind of team. I just think there's a lot of scope there, but it's trying to get those people to realize that, and also guide TV people to kind of understand how they can fit into it, or at least, hone their CVs and skill sets to make that more obvious to the hiring people. But I'm not saying, it's not like everyone needs to suddenly leave telly. I mean, I know a lot of people have, and it's sad, but it has been, a necessity both for them and probably the industry, which had too many people in it, arguably. But I think it's a sort of a kind of a jolt to say it's okay actually to have different elements to your career, or look at other things, or really niche down and go for those jobs that you can do brilliantly and better than anyone else in telly. That's fine too, but it's about being slightly more open-minded and perhaps building more of a portfolio career, and that's no bad thing in my opinion. Storytelling and creative has never been bigger. Literally every single company out there, whatever you do, whether you make shoes or you save lives or you make telly, you need to put yourselves out there with a story. You need video content. And I think companies are realizing this, and this is where both, your business and doing what you do, as well as mine, and finding the people to make those, will at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, help people find work, whether it is in the traditional telly roles that they've always done, or slightly newer, albeit creative roles in other places. And think that there's absolutely big opportunity there. It's just this kind of funny old lag while everyone's trying to work out how to make all sides talk.
You look at it like in terms of jobs. So say you've got like producers, shooting producers, production managers, like people that have been working maybe 5, 10, 15 years to get to these jobs. they know their job, and they know that the way that they've always sort of traditionally been employed by indies, they get a commission in, get somebody in, someone in a company, and away you go. So in terms of content, do you think that if there's still going to be more content being made than ever this year, but it's just not all through traditional like linear telly, it feels like there's potentially the work out there, but it's the way that they look for it might be a bit different, or the way that they network's going to be a bit different. Like how would a PD, for example, navigate themselves through these waters, do you think?
Yeah, it's tough because also, the people who have come up through digital and branded short form content have got their own black books, and therefore they don't necessarily need, the people from a slightly, albeit adjacent part of the industry to come in and take those jobs. And also there is a skill set difference. There's a lot of overlap, don't get me wrong. And we're very excited to have been working with some companies recently who really get that and successfully putting people with some TV background into these jobs. So it's totally possible, but equally there aren't suddenly loads more jobs available either in the digital or branded world. Yes, it's busier and probably growing, but those people have their own contacts. But also, actually, Bob, there are people who are in-house. The model in that sense tends to be you have your in-house team that make it happen and manage all the stakeholders and come up with the creative. And then you might employ a director to come and do the shoot. So unless it takes more of a TV format kind of shape, where you could pinch people from TV land or development or PDs come over a bit, but they'd still need to be very well versed in and at least totally love and have the right attitude towards making for social or digital and on a budget. Like it's a lot to do with attitude, actually. But to your question of where to find those jobs, I mean, there are companies like us who are, actively pushing into that area. So through people like us, I suppose, but it's a lot of it is through networking, as you flagged, and changing up the way that you approach people, and really thinking differently about how you pitch yourself, and not just sending the same old CV and the same old TV cover letter to someone at a really a funky branded company who's advertising a slightly different role. It just won't work. You need to get in there with a clever pitch and a slightly different CV. And there's a lot of chatter at the moment about transferable skills. It's such a boring phrase, isn't it? Transferable skills. It sounds like some sort of school exercise that you have to do. But it's really important. I'll come up with a better phrase for everyone so it's more stomachable. But trying to work out what you actually do on a shoot and how to translate that into either a slightly different role in an adjacent industry, or even a completely different industry, but a creative role within that. There's really good ways to do that. And there are lots of free resources out there, as well as people who can kind of coach and advise on that. But really, you need to sit down and actually take yourself out of TV land and go, okay, on my last PD job, what did I actually have to do? Okay. And you get your blank A4 piece of paper and your pen and you list out every single like micro thing that you did. And trust me, like people think, oh, it's just so niche, telly, I couldn't ever do anything else. There are so many things that you did to make that shoot happen last minute with 74 contributors, with access issues, with, whilst wrangling kit and trying to do deals at the same time.
You'd fill a page before you even hit record on the camera, wouldn't you?
Totally.
I don't think there'd be a notepad big enough, to be fair.
Yeah. And that's what people need to really value, the things that we've learned that feel very soft skill and feel a bit niche, but actually, some TV people are some of the most talented, hardworking, problem-solving people in any environment. I mean, you just put yourself next to somebody in a different industry and they go, how on earth did you achieve that? And also, do you know what, guys? We forget it's a very cool industry, and we forget that actually, if you can say you made a thing for Netflix, or you made a thing with a celebrity, or you went and filmed in a prison, I mean, all of that stuff is really valuable and actually a bit cool, and will make people, it's, when you go to a dinner with mates and they're all like, what are you working on at the moment? It's cool, isn't it? You get to
you're
say,
the one they want to talk to more. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, rather than the guy over there who just works for this company with a nondescript job. They're like, oh, you work in TV, what have you been doing recently? So there's all of that that's really important. And so I think a lot of finding out what to do next is to do with networking. By that we mean LinkedIn is brilliant. LinkedIn is the opener of doors. It is not dry, salesy, boring stuff. It can be, but if you use it properly and you follow the right people, it really can open doors and mean that the email, that when you guess the email of the company of the person that you've been commenting on their post for on LinkedIn, suddenly you're a familiar name, not a cold email compared to the rest, and they'll reply to you. So there's a lot of work that you can do there and be smart about. And yeah, I do think there's lots of opportunities, and it's big and scary, but you can absolutely find new ways of doing things with some sort of slightly new approaches.
You touched upon something there actually that we're noticing more and more. So, LinkedIn seems to have grown as a platform and as a networking tool within TV, certainly over the last couple of years. I mean, 10 years ago or whenever I joined, I'd never done anything for years because it just didn't seem like TV was the industry that used LinkedIn. But I don't know whether it was since COVID or even more recently, it seems to be really booming. And I guess because we're not together as often as we perhaps used to be pre-COVID, people are seeing it as a way to connect and reconnect. And I guess, is that some advice that you were sort of hinting at us there, and just be active on LinkedIn and other profiles and just try and get out there in the community?
I really wish I was on some kind of commission for LinkedIn, because I'm not going to put it all down single-handedly to my harping on about how great LinkedIn is for TV people. But I do think there's an element of, you try and you test it and you talk about it and other people join it. And it's like, the more you either post content yourself or comment on or share other people's content that you like, or that you think is valuable, or that you agree with, or that you want to challenge, even the more you get out. And so the more that you're going to network and sort of see people show reels and share a strong opinion on something, the more you'll attract the people as well who you feel like-minded about. And you can follow companies, you can follow production companies, you can follow really quite well-known people in the industry. You don't have to connect with them. I think that some people don't realize that you can just follow them, and then it doesn't send them a connection request. So you wouldn't be able to email them or direct message them, but you can still see their content. I feel a lot more informed since I got really on the LinkedIn bandwagon a few years back. And it is, it's curated my feed. It kind of, it implies or gives me opportunities, or I think, oh great, is that person's just dropped their show reel, they must be coming available, or oh, that company's just announced that's interesting, or oh, that's, in terms of what we do, that senior person has just announced that they've gone there and I didn't know that might mean that there's an opportunity in that company. It's what I suppose headhunters and recruiters spend all day looking at. But in terms of being a program maker in the industry, I think it's an absolute must to get good on LinkedIn. And it doesn't need to be scary. And you don't have to write your own content all the time. I think that people are like, I just don't know what to say. I don't know what to write. And it kind of doesn't matter. You either just start small, just write little things, but try and keep it regular, once a week. That's all good, but try and keep it consistent. Or share other people's things that you found interesting, just with a little bit of your own input. And that's enough just to get you going.
Yeah, you can sort of start to build up a snapshot of the industry just by spending some time on LinkedIn, right? Because all the companies are shouting about what commissions they've just picked up, what they've got going out on Channel 4, Channel 5 tonight. Yeah. The freelancers that made them are shouting about them. We've started to realise you can get a lot from it.
There is definitely ways to get in front of people on LinkedIn and impress them. And I like to think of your CV as being the factual element of your career. It spells out who you are on paper in cold hard facts.
Without
LinkedIn, color. without color, or maybe a little tiny dash, but definitely not logos and like jazz hands and none of that. But LinkedIn is like the human colored in version of who you can be yourself. You can give your personality and your opinion and some real color and context by regularly posting on LinkedIn. So I recognize people from their CVs, like me and Rosie, our heads go, you see a CV and I download the CV in my brain. That's one of my superpowers, but I don't necessarily know what they're like. But on LinkedIn, I know that if, Eloise or Sarah or Ahmed is writing about this consistently and it's popping up in my feed a lot, I feel like I get to know them, and that will definitely influence how I think of them for a certain job.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But in terms of like freelancers that are out there that are scouring those job pages looking for opportunities, should that be a gauge of like how busy the industry is, or is it more of a case of you've got exec producers and company owners up and down the UK that have got stacks of CVs, literally their inboxes are groaning at the weight of them, that they will just recruit through those CVs rather than post out onto Facebook pages or Talent Manager or all these other resources that are out there?
Definitely. There's always recruitment happening without advertising. I kind of get it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I kind of get why you wouldn't advertise a job when you've already got half a dozen or more decent CVs, at least to try first. So it's not necessarily a gauge as to how, if there are only a few jobs or loads of jobs on jobs boards. It's not necessarily a gauge of the industry's climate, because as you say, it's quite possible that there's a lot happening behind the scenes. And I think there will be a big lag as well between real jobs and commissions happening and people actually then seeing the roles come up, because there is this glut of talent that people can just try on the phone first through either their existing networks or the speculative CVs that might have come in.
If you ever ask me a word to describe freelancers, resourceful would always be quite high up the list. So with that in mind, if you're not sort of getting the jobs through people you know or companies you've worked for or hearing about it through friends or whatever, like what can they be doing in terms of being more resourceful to kind of get themselves out there? Because it sounds like if there are programs being commissioned and being recruited for internally or recruited for in a different way to the usual channels, how can they get in there in terms of being at the top of the pile or networking through a different method? What tips would you have?
I think a lot of it is about the approach. So, and again, networking, using all the tools on offer like LinkedIn, always, attending any sorts of courses and upskilling is always a good thing, but it's not necessarily going to land you a job, next week, but that's never a bad thing. But in terms of sort of standing out or getting noticed, polite persistence, I call it, because there's a point where polite persistence crosses over into really irritating / stalking. But I think having a really shit hot approach is key, because you can tell a lot from the way somebody first approaches you on email, and especially for speculative stuff, because talent people's or execs or whoever's hiring inboxes are absolutely heaving at the moment. So you need to stand out somehow. And if you're going to write me an essay in a cover note with different size fonts where it's clear that you've been cutting and pasting from other things, that's a real turn off, and you're just unlikely to get a response. If it's long, no one is going to read it, right? I'm just going to say it brutally. I mean, really, you want 2 or 3 relatively short lines, getting right to the point and asking a direct question, like, as in, why are you in touch? What do you want from me, is what I think when someone emails me. If it's not like that and it's 3 paragraphs of waffle about your life story and the things that you've worked on that are all on your CV, I'm just not interested in it. To me, it's an indication that you're not very good at kind of pitching in a way, or like presenting yourself. And whilst, we'll always try and get back to you, that's not going to be on my priority email. But if somebody does some research on me or my company, writes something really smart, witty, intuitive in that first line, flattering, look, we're a bunch of egomaniacs in telly, aren't we? So write something flattering about the thing you saw last night that it was a live session, or was it was the Traitors, and you're writing to Stephen Lambert, right? So you can write something smart about that, then something short about you, and then a direct question, or at least a kind of something that's going to make them or encourage them to come back to you, rather than, I hope to hear from you soon. That's okay, fine, I'll just file that for another time, rather than, do you have any open roles at the moment that I might be suitable for? Or might you have 15 minutes next week at some point? Or can I book in something, even if it's in 3 weeks' time, just to have a super fast chat with you to introduce myself? Those sorts of things, like provoking, call to action is what, it's called, really. Those would be my tips to get in front of people, at least to try and get a response, and then persist. You have to give up after 3 or 4 emails, I think. But most people, most decent humans, even if they're busy, will reply if you chase them 2 or 3 times.
I started out as a poster runner in the early noughties, and there was an editor there that they used to nickname Kit Kat. And rumour has it that he got that name because he would send his CV around when he was like a runner, tech assistant, trying to get an assistant's job to companies, and he would just do a hard copy of his CV because it would have probably been like mid to late 90s, so it's a different world, and it included a Kit Kat, and he had a little note with it just saying, enjoy the Kit Kat, and have a read of my CV, and if you want to get in touch, numbers on the bottom or whatever.
Amazing.
It's simple. So that was his nickname, Kit Kat, and it always seemed quirky, but for me it was almost a metaphor for how you had to approach job hunting as a freelancer. It wasn't
out.
Exactly. You wouldn't just apply for a job and away you go. It was all much more complex than that. It was really about putting yourself out there and not being embarrassed by anything. And the way that you would be treated, I felt, doing that was always with total respect, and people would respect you for doing that. And Kit Kat, if that was his nickname because he sent Kit Kats out with his CV, then it obviously landed him a good career. But I mean, is there a place for that now in this sort of world of LinkedIn and social networking?
I'm open for Kit Kats, just saying. Bribery not accepted. But no, definitely. Like, that's kind of what I mean by standing out somehow and doing that extra little bit. And it doesn't always have to cost you stuff. I mean, Kit Kat's quite expensive now. And especially if you can't feed the family at the moment, not going to be sending those out. But there's, in terms of the kind of the sentiment behind it, or the doing something that makes you stand out or makes you feel different, or people remember you, 100% you need to come up with something like that. And whether it is offering to give somebody something for free, or like, I'll come and do a half an hour session for you on something that I know that you don't, or this sort of exchange of skills with people, that it goes down a long way. It definitely does go a long way when you're trying to be remembered, but you also want to garner respect and have people think well of you. And look, Bob, you're talking about Kit Kat like 20 or plus years later. So look at how impactful his little technique was.
Yeah. People buy into people, right? I guess that's all part.
Yeah.
And
I think if you can be completely yourself as well, I think that's a really good thing. And it can be hard when you're trying to get a job, or try and fit yourself into a particular mold for a particular job. But I would always far rather someone be really straight up with me about what they're like, or be, let some of their personality show, or be upfront about any disclosures to do with disability, or, any sort of difference. Like, I really think the industry is sort of championing that, in general. Again, it's hard at the moment, and lots of people are seeing DEI jobs kind of slip by the wayside, but certainly people like us, and the industry as a whole, is really welcoming anyone who wants to be completely authentically themselves, differences and all.
Everyone knows the situation we're in as an industry. So I think it's just about taking the facts, taking what we do know, and how can we move through it and better yourself in the process.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's some great stuff in there. I appreciate your time, Kimberly, and your insights and your predictions and your knowledge. So thanks for that.
Well, unfortunately, I do not have a crystal ball, but I do have an ear tapped into what's going on. But it's just, I wish everyone all the best for 25. Who knows what it has to hold, really. But I will endeavour to be the best communicator of anything that I can be, that is of use to anyone in a kind of content, TV, digital or otherwise role. And I'm really excited to see what you two have got planned this year. So let's keep in touch and maybe check back in a few months.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Cool.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. Speak soon.
See you later.
Yeah.
Bye.